Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a really pivotal moment in European history,
Hmm.
the French Revolution, late 1780s France, right after the American Revolution, actually.
Yeah, timing's important there. But our main goal, our mission for this deep dive is really to get under the skin of something specific about the French Revolution.
Right. We're looking at how the excesses, the extreme stuff that happened, actually ended up undermining the whole idea of democracy spreading in France. It's part of our bigger look at the rise of democracy.
Exactly, because it's a stark contrast, isn't it?
Yeah.
America has its revolution, gets a democracy. France has its revolution.
And it goes down much bloodier path, eventually ending up with Napoleon,
I could just...
dictator. So yeah, let's unpack why. Why the difference?
Okay, let's do it. So first things first, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what was the French Revolution?
Basically, it's this huge, intense period starting in the late 1780s,
Uh-huh.
where ordinary French people were fundamentally unhappy with the king, with how things were run. They fought to change the whole system, challenging the monarchy's power, basically.
And a really early key part of that challenge was something called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. You mentioned resources. This is a big one. Who put this together?
That was the National Assembly. And they were essentially a group formed by regular French folks, the commoners, who felt completely shut out by the existing government.
Right. The Estates General wasn't really working for them.
Exactly. So they formed their own body, the National Assembly, to demand their rights and figure out a new way to govern France. The Declaration was like their mission statement.
Gotcha. So what did it actually say? What were these rights? It declared that all men, and the emphasis on men is historically important, had certain basic fundamental rights. Things like liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. You can really hear the influence of Enlightenment thinkers there.
Oh, yeah. And the American Declaration of Independence, too, right? That must have been a huge influence.
Absolutely. It was a very recent and powerful example of people asserting their rights.
Okay, so you have the National Assembly pushing for change, this declaration. What about the guy at the top, King Louis XVI? How did he take all this?
Well, not well. Predictably, perhaps. He was definitely not happy about losing power. He resisted these reforms from the National Assembly.
Didn't he try to, escape?
He did. Tried to flee the country with his family, but they got caught near the border. Big moment. Made him look even worse, obviously. Increased the distrust.
Yeah, I bet. So what happened to him in the end?
Well, things got more and more radical. He was eventually put on trial by the revolutionary government, imprisoned, and then executed, guillotined.
Wow. Okay, so the king is gone. Things must have been pretty chaotic then. Who takes charge? I've heard of the Committee of Public Safety.
Mm.
Sounds ominous.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it was a really powerful group. They basically took control during a very radical phase of the revolution. Their stated job was to protect the revolution from enemies inside and outside France.
Enemies inside and out. So lots of suspicion.
Oh, definitely. And a key figure, maybe the key figure on this committee, was Maximilien Robespierre.
Robespierre, okay, his name comes up a lot. What was his deal? What drove him?
Robespierre was, let's say, complex. He was deeply committed to the revolution's ideals, or at least his interpretation of them, but he came to believe that to achieve this perfect republic of virtue, they needed to eliminate anyone who opposed it.
Eliminate how?
He argued for using terror, his word, as a form of justice,
Right.
basically using extreme violence and fear to crush opposition and enforce revolutionary principles.
Terror is justice. That's
Right.
chilling. And that leads directly to the Reign of Terror, I assume.
Exactly. The Reign of Terror was this incredibly dark period, led by Robespierre and the committee.
Yeah.
Thousands upon thousands of people were arrested, often on really weak evidence, just suspicion or accusations from neighbors.
And trials, were they fair?
Fair. Not even close. As one of our sources bluntly puts it, there was no due process of law. Trials were often quick, outcomes predetermined. The guillotine was working overtime. It was a time of intense fear. You could be denounced and executed very quickly.
Man, so they overthrew a king they saw as tyrannical only to end up with this, a different kind of tyranny, almost worse in some ways because it was so unpredictable.
That's a really important point. The very people who suffered under the old system were now facing this new, terrifying reality.
Okay, so this chaos can't last forever.
Right.
Eventually, something else happens, a coup d'etat. What is that exactly?
A coup d'etat, it's French for stroke of state, is basically a sudden, forceful takeover of the government. It's illegal, outside the normal rules, often involves the military. Think of it as a power grab.
Right. And who staged this coup in France? Who grabbed the power?
That would be Napoleon Bonaparte.
Ah, Napoleon.
The military general, the very successful, very popular military general. He'd won big victories for France, was seen as a hero by many. He saw the instability, the weakness of the revolutionary government at that point.
And saw his chance.
Pretty much. He used his military backing and popularity to overthrow the government in this coup d'etat.
And with Napoleon Bonaparte taking charge, that was pretty much the end of the road for the revolution's democratic dreams, wasn't it?
It really was. He consolidated power quickly, eventually naming himself Emperor of France. So this whole cycle, from absolute monarchy through revolution, terror, ended with another absolute ruler.
Yeah.
Just a different one. A tragic irony, really.
Definitely tragic. Okay, so let's circle back to our main question then. How did all these excesses, the reign of terror, the violence, the instability, how did that specifically undermine the chance for democracy?
Well, it's crucial to remember it started with democratic intentions. The National Assembly, the Declaration of Rights, those were genuinely aimed at liberty, representation. Even some nobles were initially on board.
Then things went sideways. What were the key triggers for that shift towards extremism?
Several things piled up. King Louis's resistance, his attempted escape that really damaged trust. Then the war starting with Austria and Prussia.
Why did they get involved?
They were monarchies too. They were terrified the revolution would spread. So that external threat created this crisis atmosphere inside France, made people feel desperate, maybe willing to accept more extreme measures to defend the revolution.
And executing the king must have been a point of no return.
Absolutely. A huge radical step. It solidified the break with the past, but also terrified other European powers and deepened divisions within France itself. It ramped up the stakes incredibly high.
Okay, then Robespierre, the committee, the reign of terror. How did that period actively destroy the foundations for democracy?
Fundamentally, the reign of terror just trampled all over democratic principles. Rule of law, gone. Due process, ignored. People were executed without fair trials, based on suspicion. Fear became the main tool of government.
So instead of building institutions,
Exactly. Instead of building stable, representative institutions, the focus became just surviving, denouncing others before they denounced you. This constant fear, this paranoia, it completely poisoned the well for any kind of trust or cooperation needed for democracy. The rights they declared at the start, meaningless during the terror.
it makes sense that people would just get exhausted by that, right? The fear, the constant change, the violence.
Precisely. Years of this turmoil created a vacuum. People were desperate for stability, for order, even if it meant giving up some of those revolutionary ideals. The chaos made the idea of a strong leader very appealing.
And that's where Napoleon steps in.
That's the opening he exploited. He offered strength, order, and end to the chaos. The military success helped his image. The coup wasn't just him imposing his will, it was also tapping into a widespread desire to just stop the revolution's bleeding and instability.
So the violence basically ate itself and created the conditions for a dictator.
In essence, yes. The extremism, the lack of due process, the nonstop violence, the constant changes in who was in charge, our sources really point to these factors. They didn't just happen alongside the failure of democracy. They actively caused it, paving the way for Napoleon.
It's like the cure became worse than the disease, in a way.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
The methods used to save the revolution ultimately destroyed its democratic potential and led France back to autocratic rule.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've seen the French Revolution kicking off with these really quite admirable democratic goals. Liberty, rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Man.
Yeah, the initial energy was definitely there. But then came the reign of terror under Robespierre, a period of just brutal violence and fear that completely contradicted those early ideals. No fair trials, rights trampled.
And that very chaos, that instability born from the terror and the constant upheaval, created the perfect conditions for Napoleon Bonaparte to perform his coup d'etat.
All right. He seized power, eventually became emperor, and that democratic experiment was over.
So the big takeaway, the lesson maybe, is that revolutions aiming for liberty can end up destroying it if they resort to extreme violence and disregard fundamental rights. The terror made Napoleon's promise of order seem attractive.
It's a powerful and sobering historical lesson. The chaos made authoritarian rule look like a relief to many people at the time.
Definitely something to think about. And for you, listening, to keep thinking about this, here are a few questions.
First, what were those initial democratic ideas of the revolution? And how did the reign of terror directly clash with them? Where was the contradiction?
Second, think about Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety. What specific things did they do that made a stable democracy pretty much impossible in France at that time?
Third, how did that intense fear and instability caused by all the violence and purges actually create the opportunity for Napoleon to take control?
And finally, a broader one. Can you think of other times in history, maybe more recent times too, where movements started with good intentions, aiming for freedom or justice, but ended up in places that weren't democratic at all? What factors do you think led to that?
Really good questions to chew on. Understanding this turbulent period in France, I think, gives us insights into the challenges of democracy building that are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the French Revolution's complex legacy. It shows that the road to democracy can be incredibly rocky. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.